Okay, so what to do if you're wanting to make use of a third-party connector, in this instance, Adobe Sign, but you can't quite work out what the parameter set is expecting or what format it needs it in to actually successfully make use of one of the connector's capabilities. So what I'm going to do is show you how you can basically go from nothing and utilizing various errors and techniques, you can figure out what it needs for you to actually execute the desired action of the connector. So in this instance, I've just got a Power Apps Canvas app that's going to allow us to specify the person that we basically want to sign a document. Below that, we're just making use of the connector to bring back available templates that we've got so that we can make use of the ID. And then the execute button is basically going to say, send it to that email address, that template document for them to sign. So at the moment, we've currently got the start of this collection that's going to fulfill the parameter set of the connector. So we're going to basically strip that back to bare bones. Just make it so it's happy. Just to kind of show you me starting from scratch. If we look at the actual thing that we're trying to execute, we're making use of the Adobe Sign connector, and the action we're using is create agreement by template v2. So if you look across the top, it'll be helpful and kind of walk you through the parameters that it's expecting, but it doesn't necessarily always show you what the format is. And sometimes you can just think, where do I even begin? So initially, you might be forgiven for thinking, oh, I'll look at the documentation. And whilst the documentation will give you hints in terms of the type of value it's expecting, such as text, table, or record, or a number, it still doesn't really sometimes spell out the format. It would be fantastic if they actually did an example of, an actual valid entry, which would be very helpful. So looking at this documentation alone, it did help in that I know, okay, agreement name, template, it's ultimately expecting a library document ID. So I initially thought, I just need to specify a straight up ID, but no, you have to do it as a record with a column of library document ID, and then basically specify the ID. Some of them, it will give you the options up front. So for this one, I can see that I've only got the choice of e-sign written, so that's very user-friendly, and we can work that one out. Similar for the state, if we look at the documentation, and this is what I mean, it's not always easy, but if we do Control F, we can see in here. So again, even here, I'm thinking, well, the state in which the agreement should land, what can I just put anything in there? So you can kind of trawl through these in the hope that it is eventually going to tell you a list of valid states. But I think for this one, I then utilized another technique where I basically utilized the same connector and trying to do the same action in Power Automate Flow. And Power Automate Flow tends to be far more user-friendly in terms of requesting the required information to fulfill that action. So we can use this to our advantage. So I've come into Power Automate Flow here, and I've basically got the same action. So create an agreement from a library template and send for signature, worded slightly differently, but it is essentially the same thing. So here we can see it's tapping into the available templates already, so I can choose one. Now, in terms of getting the format from that, if I click our little friend here, to do it as an array, this is where you start to learn what it's after. Now, there are some kind of gotchas, as in you can't just always copy and paste this information, because I only did that portion. I didn't actually wrap it in the square brackets as a table. So if we come down to the trickiest bit, was fulfilling the participant sets info, and that's because it's kind of got a nested table within it. So what we can do here is, if I come to the Power Automate flow, so you see it's asking for participant email 1, because it's a table. You can add more than one recipient. Okay, so we've got role here. You could get lists of valid roles, the order. Let's have a look at advanced options, and we've got all of this good stuff. So if we come back to what we're basically trying to add by way of the collection, we can see that you email authentication mechanism, you choose a password, you'll want to specify a password, and so on. And if we break these out into arrays, you can kind of get a heads up on what it's after. So let's just imagine that we only knew it started off with member infos. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to specify, so member infos, and then I'm going to do it as if I'm doing a record. And you may be forgiven at this point for thinking, well, really, it's after an email address, isn't it? So I'm just going to put email, and I'm going to say use text input 1, text value. I'm going to add that to build out the collection. I'm going to execute the ultimate action that we're after, and it's going to very quickly shout at us in red. And if we hover over, it's going to say valid participant set role is missing. Okay, so you're now basically going to go through and systematically give it what it's asking for, basically. So here I'm going to go, and you also need to determine whether it's within a table or just alongside the member info level. So I'm going to go role, and if we want to work out what roles are available, we can see we've got signer there. But if we come back to our more friendly view, I could, in theory, I imagine, choose any of these, but I want the signer one. So role, and then I'm just going to do signer. So again, I'm going to clear the collection. I'm going to add it again. I'm going to execute again. And if we hover over here, it's saying order of a participant set can only be a positive integer. Well, at this point, I didn't even know it wanted order, let alone it wanted it to be an integer. But okay, we'll go with that. So order, and we'll go with 1. Again, clear the collection, add it, and let's see what we get now. Order of a participant can only be. This is another gotcha. It is case sensitive, I believe. Let's just see if that's the issue. It can only be a positive integer. Let me just cheat and see what I did earlier. Order 1. It was lowercase. I don't want to wrap it in quotes because that really invalid order. Let's just make sure I've stacked it correctly. Role order. Unless I'm not happy with the way round it is. Sorry about this. I'm going to work through it though, because I want to make this as true to life as possible. Let's just double check. Member infos. Okay. This is where, if we'd gone back into here, this probably would have helped, because if we look, you've got that wrapped as a table, although we've specified it in curly braces, the member infos, and an order and role sit outside of it. So this is where you kind of have to use a mixture of them, because the error there is just screaming it wants order, and it wants it to be a positive, not a minus number, so 1. So we've that there is correct, but it's not going to say, oh, it's correct, but it's in the wrong order. It's just because it's can't process it. It's just thinking you haven't specified it. So I think what I need to do as per that is within members info, although having said that, that does actually look like it's in the right place, and it was happy with. I mean, I'm pretty sure that's not going to be right, but let's go with it. Yeah, so now it's gone back to the role. So it was in the right place. Let's confirm this again. Order 1, role, signer, clear, add, execute. It's not even complaining now, which is very interesting, considering I'm sure that's not enough info alone. But perhaps it is actually. Because if I provided nothing for the email, cleared the collection, added again, executed, it'll say emails missing. So if I provide that again, do a couple of Control Zs there if you just wondered how that miraculously came back. Clear the collection again, add the value, execute, and that's worked. The mind boggles. Sorry, I was expecting it to be more difficult this time round, because this is kind of what I was ultimately expecting to get to. Although some of the options will be optional, and however I did it before, it ended up me specifying all of this. So I'm not sure what's happened between yesterday and today. But anyway, as I was going through this, it was kind of saying, I want an email. Then it was saying,